Hey guys, welcome back to Power Up Gamers. I'm German D&D, and I have two guests with me today from the Ice on Ice YouTube channel. I know we're going to be doing a video that I'm gonna be releasing soon as part of a week-long workshop kind of deal. The workshop itself is built around storytelling and DMing, even though players can obviously use the same techniques and tips that we kind of give. But tonight we're going to be talking about how to invoke an emotional response within a player's character. Very similar to a video I did with Drake, only his side was within the player themselves. And I felt enough of a topic to divide them up into two videos. So Connor, Megan, say hello. Oh, plug your YouTube channel, your recently finished Kickstarter, your playtest setting, whatever you would like to do. And we'll go ahead and start with Connor.
Hey guys, I'm Connor. I am half of the channel Dice on Ice, and I'm sitting next to my other half of Dice on Ice. As you can tell by the funny looking little decal in the background, we're actually in the same room. There we go. You can see my hand over there. We finished up a Kickstarter for our supplement called Cryfoth, a world of ravaged wastelands and demonic tyranny and the struggle for survival in a blasted world. And we're really excited when we're blown away by how much support we've gotten over the past month for it.
Oh, it was amazing. I had a feeling the setting would do good, having played in the setting several times, but it's always nice to show and see the kind of support we have within the communities, and it helps those of us who have yet to release something and to have a bit more hope for our own stuff as well. So Megan, say hello.
Hey everyone, I am the other half of Dice on Ice, and yeah, so we just finished our Kickstarter, and we are doing some playtesting, and we're really excited. We're getting some really good feedback, and we're looking forward to releasing other versions, and yeah. We have a YouTube channel, Dice on Ice, which just hit 100 subscribers, which means we get our own personalized URL, which is exciting. But yeah, that's where you can find us, and we do a lot of videos. Both of us DM. So yeah, and looking forward to doing this workshop.
Awesome. I definitely recommend subscribing to the YouTube channel. Or some excellent live gameplays over the as little videos and it's really nice to see a couple doing a channel like that. It's definitely a lot of work for one person, and such as I know. And I can only imagine that being a couple, you guys talk all the time anyway. So having that kind of to talk about and help keep each other inspired has to be just a huge boon. So that's awesome. So we're gonna kick off the topic on how to invoke emotional responses within player characters. And to be honest, I really don't have a certain technique I follow. One of my big tips is know the players and the characters. As in this case, definitely know the characters, whatever backstory the player wants to give you. Pretty much learn it. That just is kind of one of the biggest tips I could give someone on this is know what the player's idea of the character is, know the character's personality, and then you all kind of know what to throw at them. So what do you guys kind of do to deal with this topic?
In a game that I'm running, in which Megan's a player character, I actually did that a few times with her character herself. What I do is I kind of like throw these weird, not really weird, but these really difficult scenarios that your character would have a dilemma with, where it like this quandary, whether it's, you know, coming across a loved one that you've been distant from for a while and you're not sure how you should feel about them, right? Or, you know, Megan's character in this game, she's a tiefling in our setting who have this, you know, very insatiable addiction to like demonic power. That's how they kind of work in our setting. And so I often throw at her demons and like, how do you respond to them, you know, after slaying them, right? Do you want to harness their power? Do you want to like absolve yourself of it? And it's just these dilemmas, just throw dilemmas after the other to kind of help steer your character or your player's character's identities, right? Like give them the options of choosing between, do you save the person? Do you let them die and get the artifact, right? Like, do you let someone die for the greater good, or do you, you know, sacrifice the greater good for this person, you know, and stuff like that, right? These quandaries.
I like doing the same thing, only usually I do it kind of general based on what a human reaction to that type of would be. Such as dealing with the loss of a loved one. I know most humans tend to grieve. Some will get angry, etc. And then I watch how the character responds on, and then that kind of tells me how to work with the particular character. How about you, Megan?
So I find that when you are trying to kind of promote a very strong emotion, say horror or sadness, it's something that people don't usually feel on a day-to-day basis. So I feel like, especially for me, like you really have to get into that mindset. You have to get into that, you know, that headspace a little bit. I find that I just played in a game by Alan where he put it in Gloam, and it had to be one of the most emotionally charged games that I had ever played with. And I love that. So I was actually thinking about this myself, was how did he do that? How did he, you know, make us all feel these emotions? I think one of the things he did was he told the players ahead of time, like, I'm going to put some stuff in here. I'm going to put some scary stuff in here. I want you to react, you know, with fear. And I think it's very much like this group mentality that if, you know, you kind of set the scene up and the players are kind of adding to it, this whole emotion will kind of build and build.
Yeah.
And so
very organic too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once you start with just a little bit of nudging, it develops its own thing. One of the things I like to do, uh, as you mentioned, to get kind of in that headspace is there's a lot of movies and stuff that I connect to personal stuff that I was going through at the time. For example, or if I want to deal with the loss of a loved one, not in the sense of death, but being apart from them, they're no longer part of my life, I'll watch the musical South Pacific. And it's not particularly the musical, it's the fact me and one of my ex-girlfriends watched it together all the time. So just by watching it, I'll kind of get in that mindset. I'll start thinking about how when we were together, and then I can take that into a character as a player, or if I'm DMing, then I'm already kind of in the emotion and the mindset.
Yeah, I think that a big thing, and I know that a lot of people might find it as a distraction, which, you know, you have to really gauge what's right for you, but putting background music, you know, giving your players some background music to listen to while they're playing can really, really set the mood of kind of what you want to play really quietly.
Oh, definitely. I wish there was a way to do it in Hangouts that worked decently. Unfortunately, so far, every way I've tried, it doesn't come across as good. But face to face, I definitely think that's a big thing. I've even dimmed the lights in the room. I've lit candles, or just depending on the emotion and etc. So that's definitely a very good point to make, Megan, and something I wouldn't have thought of on my own, just giving tips and tricks. I wouldn't have even thought about, okay, this stuff I do even before a session to kind of get in the mindset and the emotion. And there's definitely nothing wrong with the DM telling the players what emotion he's trying to go for. I usually don't, because I like to see reactions just based on the people, or not something first. But that's just me.
I actually like to set up the tone of the game ahead of time. Often, where I'll set up like the themes that I want to capture with this game, right?
Yeah.
Or let's say there's a game about this pilgrimage to a land of safety.
In that,
I want to have like those themes.
Yeah, in that session 0, I usually set the overall tone. Like most people who play with me know, I like the darker side of fantasy, the very kind of black and white evil's already run, and you're trying to be a good person and do what you have to do. So I do tend to say something, and usually in the session 0, or if it's a one shot in the interest post, it will be dark, suspenseful, horror based, stuff like that. But I tend to leave it kind of open for each situation to be its own thing also.
I think another really big point to bring up is like tone of voice as the DM when you're explaining a scene. I know some people get really excited and they tend to go through it, you know, quickly, right? They tend to kind of talk really fast. And I think that there's a lot to be said about if you're trying to make something spooky or mysterious to just kind of slow down, you know, take a lot of breaths, really build up that suspense.
Yes, for my own voice, if I'm doing it spooky, I'll usually talk quieter. I'll slow down the speech, and I kind of deepen my voice a little.
Well, even the inverse is true too. If it's an action-packed scene, you can speak a little louder, quicker. Come on, you know, build up the speed. Like you have to do something now, right? Like this, just very, very tense moments. You can do it with more quick-paced, more kind of loud words. Not like shouting, but like, you know, words that have a lot of punch to them, right?
Yeah,
a lot of weight to them. So you can do very tense scenes like that, or action-packed ones.
And in addition to your voice, also body language. If it's exciting and you're trying to kind of give that sense of urgency, a lot of fast hand gestures, for something like a sense of loss, I tend to kind of drop my head, kind of almost like half close my eyes. So things like that will help. And the players also pick up on that. And then they respond based on what you put into it. The more you put into it as a DM, the more they're gonna give back. And vice versa. So definitely audio's a big thing. Also visual descriptions, very vivid images, to where you basically paint the picture of what's going on, which as DMs we should be doing anyway. But in key scenes like that, it's definitely a bit more important.
Yeah, like I also find too, there's nothing that can be said for of like the thing that you're fighting. You know, like I once had people fighting this thing, and I was trying to explain it as best I could. It was like it was a zombie beholder, right? And yeah, you know, that's kind of scary, and I'm explaining it, but then I show the picture, and then people are like, holy crap, that's terrifying. Oh
yeah,
we need to run away from it, as opposed to, you know,
if
something else.
If you can find a piece of artwork that captures what you're trying to convey, it adds so much. And it doesn't even have to be the best artwork either. Just something close to what you're trying to convey, and players will fill in the rest. So that's some of the same tricks I kind of talked with Drake, and it's understandable because the topic kind of lends to each other's videos. Now, one of the things that interests me in this particular video and topic is when we're trying to evoke an emotional response from a character, but not necessarily trying to invoke it from the player. I tend to aim more at the players because the players will then put it into the characters. But it's kind of interesting. So say we're doing something like horror, and you want the character to be scared, but you don't necessarily want the players to be terrified. So how would you guys kind of aim it more towards the character rather than the players?
Well, there are actual mechanical things you can do to a player character, like give them a fear condition or the shaken condition, stuff like that, after like a wisdom save or something. That's just let's press a button essentially, like, hey, press a button, bam, they're frightened, right? But that's kind of a heavy-handed solution, because you can't really do that. Oh man, your character now has a sad condition. That doesn't exist. So, it's hard to do it that way. It's honestly you have to tackle your the character's personality traits, their flaws, bonds, whatever little jots of notes they have down. You know, it'll tie in with the backstory, to tie in with their personality traits. You got to hit those, and it's hard because I can see some players may not pick up on the fact that you're targeting the characters' fears or wants or joys.
Yeah.
So that can be hard to actually convey properly. So a seamless way is, sure, you can always target the players instead of the characters, because as you said, the players' emotions will manifest in their characters' emotions, right? Like you show off a cute monster and someone's going to find it adorable, whether or not the characters actually do. One of the players is like, oh man, this owl bear is adorable, I want it as a pet. Right?
Exactly.
The moment, right? So,
Megan, you got anything to add there?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to really, for a DM, to really talk with the player about the character. Learn as much as they can about the character, so that, like Connor was saying, they can tailor it to the character. They can, this, and it's okay to ask really pointed questions. Let's say you're running a horror game. You can ask the question to your player, what is your character's biggest fear? And then work that into, the story, so that, the player's not, claustrophobic, but the character is, right? And so to do that and to evoke that kind of emotion, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely tend to play on a character's backstory when it comes to this, as I'll often use maybe a flashback of something similar in the backstory. That's one of my big ways that I use to kind of aim it towards the characters rather than the players. So that's definitely some good information there. We got a little bit of time I'm left. Is there some other things that you guys do to kind of invoke these emotions?
So what I've been really getting into lately, sorry, the thing that I've been really getting into is sound effects, and I am not a person who can do voices or sound effects, so I do rely on more audio means. Like I use Reaper. But if you are able to do sound effects, I think that is an awesome way, change your voice a little bit. Like if you're fighting a scary monster, even just, deepening your voice a little bit, talking like that monster could invoke some big emotions.
One of the things I do that to go with sound effects, and unfortunately right now I can't do it because my computer can't handle it, but I used to use Roll20, and they have a bunch of free like ambient music, sound effects, and for it, I'll go ahead and give kind of an example. Or I had this session where characters were going into this ruined temple, and the whole point was to stop up some sacrifices. And I had the sounds of water dripping, although, as a DM, I made it into blood dripping. I had a gong that was playing. I had some monks chanting in what was actually Tibetan, although you couldn't really make it out. And I had them all going like at the same time. And then occasionally you would hear like a woman screaming, and using those sound effects really added to it. And players afterwards told me they were terrified before they even saw what was going on.
Yeah, and so I find, especially for me being, you know, a woman, my voice is a little bit higher. I'm not as intimidating, you know, if I'm trying to do a demon voice, but, you know.
If I sound like
this. Yeah. I definitely...
It's a lot more terrifying.
Yeah, I definitely love the idea of Reaper or Audacity or other programs you can use to alter your voice, because I'm not big on voices either. I have a couple accents I can do, but one of the things I have to be careful about is because of my speech impediment. If I pick something that's too hard, then people can't understand me. So definitely some kind of like just voice altering in program like that. Like I could never do a really good female voice that's a little bit higher pitch than mine. It's just not something I can do. So for a good female voice, I tend to speak quieter and softer. But if I had a program such as Reaper, I can tweak it to make it sound like a woman.
Yeah, the other thing is that, you know, it's all about what you feel most comfortable with. But you don't have to do anything big. Like, even just the littlest change in your voice or in a sound effect or something can make a huge difference, I find.
Oh, definitely. Connor, looks like you had something to say.
Well, I was just gonna, say exactly what Megan said. Is like, don't have to these big alterations. You can just slowly and deepen your voice a bit to be the plodding melodic character, or you can speed it up and be a wily little gnome creature that flits around and jumps off trees, or you can be someone that's really angry or tired or something, and just like change your voice around just a bit, just to show off these different emotions, and it can just affect how your characters react, or even the players, right? So
yeah, and same with the sound effects. You don't have to necessarily have an audio clip. One of the things I do is I have a cane, and I'll use it and hit the ground if someone's walking with like a walking stick, or if I want like a loud thump, I just bam.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah, no, I use my desk. I use my desk a lot, you know, just like with like knocking or like skittering noises. Like I'll tap my desk.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I'm not the best with like vocal sound effects. They often sound very bad, but I do what I can. And that's what it's all about. Do what you can, do what you feel comfortable with.
And yeah, like creaking, for example, or I have this big office padded chair, and all I got to do is lean back a little bit and lift up some, and I get a slow creak. So that's definitely something that kind of helps. Props are another good array. If you have something special, or like one of my kind of go-to props is I have a small styrofoam skull. Oh, that's pretty much about the size of my hand. And then I can kind of hold it up here by the webcam, and or I'll put it on top of my staff, and they'll see the tip of my staff with the skull on it. And then I describe, they might be seeing like a skull hanging on a spike somewhere. So that's little tips, tricks, definitely some good stuff. It's definitely a hard topic to kind of deal with, because there's not one right way of doing this. It's kind of whatever works for you.
Yeah, and I think too, it's a little bit harder to invoke emotions online, especially because you know when you're in a room with a bunch of people, they're all kind of there. They're in the same headspace. You can kind of see what they're doing, as opposed to online. You know, someone is having Facebook open, it doesn't have the lights dimmed. It's a very cheery thing in their room. So they don't feel that same ambiance that, you're trying to.
That's definitely a good point. It definitely is a lot harder to do online. It's part of it also comes from not being in the same room, so you can't judge the reactions quite as good. Like the I tensed up. You might have seen my shoulders right just a little bit, but if you weren't really watching for that, you wouldn't have known. Whereas if you were sitting in the same room, it was pretty obvious just by how my body kind of shifted. So that's definitely a good thing. And body language is a big thing from the player side of it. And by watching the player's reactions, I can usually tell how they're gonna have the character react before they even get a chance to. So that's another little tip that's a bit different, because when you're watching it for a player's reaction, you're not thinking about the character. So your own state of mind is something that kind of makes the distinction between the two. So we covered quite a bit. Actually, we got maybe 5-10 minutes. If you guys have something else you want to hit on, or we can kind of figure out how to do an example or a template for this, which is something I've been doing with these videos. Originally, the idea was to release one of these videos each day during this kind of workshop / convention, and then run a game that night, based on the topic of the day. Unfortunately, because of my health, I'm not going to be able to do that. I do plan on running at least one really good game doing in these videos. But up to you guys, we got several minutes yet before we have to switch over. So, Megan, go ahead, Connor.
I think we hit on like a lot of the things for hitting your character's emotions. So
yeah. There is one thing I also do tend to do. But this comes even before the session and even kind of before the prep. When I first decide, okay, I want to run a really emotional one-shot or a session, and I pick the emotion I'm gonna be hitting on, and I'll often look at history, culture, different aspects that kind of relate to that. Fear, for example, one of my favorite fear things to look at is I go back and study the Black Death plague and how society as a whole was terrified of this. And I just kind of get in that mindset, as Megan said earlier, but by looking at how it's affected people throughout history, that kind of tells me some of the ways I need to kind of invoke it, describe it within the session.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that knowing knowing a lot about your setting or where it takes place is really important, so that you're not scrambling. You can really focus on the mood. You can really focus on more important aspects to the story than trying to get your facts right. And if you kind of did a little bit of stuff before that, you kind of know the mood, it would be easier.
Yeah. Another thing in that kind of goes with that is pick the proper setting. And if you're playing a horror setting, for example, you want something dark, dragon grin, cry for artworks well, for these kind of things. And so those are kind of my go-to for kind of that horror spooky kind of things. Whereas if I'm dealing with a sense of loss, probably my own setting of Lagat, because a lot of stuff's happened throughout decades and hundreds of years. So just picking a setting that kind of matches the emotion can be a huge thing. Okay, so This is definitely very much along the lines with Drake when it comes to kind of an example. It's really hard to kind of do an example of this. So if you guys are more comfortable, we can do kind of a similar template like I did with Drake. Or we can attempt to give an example.
So I think a way to tie in everything that we've been talking about and to really kind of create a template that DMs can use is to look at the 5 senses. Don't just look at eyesight, what you see. A great way to do is what you smell, what you hear, touch. All those things kind of can be wrapped up in what we've been talking about into kind of a good reminder.
That's something I use in pretty much every session I run, even if it's not meant to be a particularly emotional scene. And just by hitting on those senses, it helps players imagine it. And if they can picture it and see it in their heads, they're going to react almost as if it was really happening around them.
That's an example.
Hi, kitty. We got another guest star.
Yeah. I guess an example would be, okay, let's use the example of players just going down a door. Now, you can say that, but if you really want to evoke a strong emotion of them just walking down a corridor, you can say that you smell the dampness, the moss is growing off the stones. It feels clammy. You can say that, and then you can use, audio effects to kind of enhance it. Maybe they hear a knock on the wall and there's nothing there, or and maybe just do like pictures. Maybe you have a really cool picture of a dark hallway that you can show them, and I don't know what you're.
Yeah, definitely some good things there, and definitely very much what I tend to do. So we'll give them a second, grab a piece of paper, pen, and we'll kind of run through a small template type example. Because I think that's really the easiest way of doing an example. Okay, they should be back by now. Hopefully they paused the video while they did it. So the first thing I do on this piece of paper is I write emotion and up top. Just the word emotion, and then beside it, which emotion we're going to work with. I think it would be interesting if we do one that isn't as common. And grief, and sense of loss is a huge one. It's done a lot of good examples also. So let's pick a different emotion. I've seen anger done sometimes. How about we do something like depression? And for example, or sadness, but we'll say more of a depressed kind of setting. And underneath the emotion, write down the word connection. And we'll have both Megan and Connor can pick one of the characters they play that they're really familiar with. And we'll give an example of what the connection is in this particular scene. So first, let's figure out which characters you guys will use, and then I'll kind of figure out some kind of scene.
The character that immediately jumps up to me is my rogue that I played a while ago in one of Megan's games. Duncan.
Okay.
A former soldier who got conscripted in the war because he had nothing left in his life, as his family had been burnt to a crisp by the enemy mages. And that's why there was this war to begin with. And I see him as a very depressed and sad man. Like, he's lost everything and has nothing really to live for anymore. But he still carries on because he's a survivor, a struggler,
he's
a striker. He's a soldier, you know? But and then so like the way that the war kind of happened shaped him as a person, and then now I got to play with him as a post-war vet who has no home to go home to, right?
Okay.
Because the only thing, you know, like that. So he's a very sad character, and it was interesting exploring his grief over the course of the campaign. And so that's immediately who gets sprung to mind for that kind of emotion.
Awesome. Megan?
Yeah, so what immediately kind of jumped to me was I'm going to be playing a tiefling in one of Connor's upcoming games, Red, who is also in his campaign, but in the one-shot, it's going to be her several years later. And yeah, it's kind of a similar situation. She thought that she could take down her enemy, someone that had caused her a lot of grief, and he ended up just killing everyone that she loved, taking everything away from her, and just showed that he could not be defeated the way that she thought. And so she's kind of lost a lot of hope for the world, kind of lost her self-worth, her will to live almost.
Okay. So some very good characters that definitely tells me right away just from having a little bit of the backstory that they definitely fit with this depression, sadness kind of emotion. Just in general, they've experienced it, they've lived with it. So we will do just a little quick scene. And we will say they've been hired to take care of some cultists. They found the they managed to kind of make the way to this location without too many problems. But one of the first things I would do as kind of a connection and to connect the characters to that particular setting is both of you have had family that you've lost, loved ones. And now, me as a DM, I don't know specifics, so I don't know if it was kid, wife, etc. But I am going to say that I am gonna assume that both characters have lost a child, whether it's their own, a brother, sister that was young, a niece, nephew, something along those lines. So immediately, one of the first things that comes to mind is, as you're approaching this place where you know the coldest are at, throwing something as simple as off in the undergrowth, you see a small ragged toy. It's a small stuffed teddy bear that most children in this setting have hold as something precious to them. And then I will kind of relay it depending on different things. Kind of being a soldier, you notice that the arm is kind of turned, almost as if someone was tugging the child away from the toy. And then I would come up with something for Megan's character, kind of similar. Megan, you notice the stitching in on this toy is very familiar. It reminds you of a toy you had as a child, and you know that the tailor in your home village made the same toy. So immediately I've connected both of the players and the characters to this toy. And therefore they're connected to what's happening in the setting. So I would, under that little connection, I would write down something like child's teddy bear, arm turn, fine stitching comes from yada yada town. So that's kind of how I would do that aspect. Then we go a bit further into kind of what Megan was saying with the five senses, the visuals. You approach, you can hear the screams of young children, and it sounds like they're in pain. And so immediately there's kind of that sense of torture. You can smell the hot arid dust from these corridors. That is very sterile. And you just hit all the senses. And I tend to put those under the visual, even though you hit all the senses and you write out with sense and just a short, like one sentence description. And then I do what I call audio, and it's things like I'll talk slower, I'll talk softer, I'll kind of hang my head, kind of look away from the camera. Stuff we discussed earlier on. It's kind of like the visual clues I want to give as a person under the audio. So that's kind of the template I would use. How about you guys? Is there something along that template that you would like to add, maybe talk on a little bit further?
If like the theme is sadness, I want to make sure that almost every single scene in this dungeon that we're exploring with these cultists is in some way sad or evokes sadness out of the players or their characters, right? Like, so you want to make sure that everything kind of comes back to your mission statement, which is, make the players feel sad, right? And so if they're walking on this corridor and you want them to feel sad, maybe, if this connection's with this child, right, you can have, the pitter patter of small feet along with like crying that's echoing through the corridors or stuff like that, like things that are really hitting on this, kind of like maternal or paternal kind of emotion that you're kind of evoking because of this teddy bear, right?
One of the things I also would do is I would make that corridor very long and feel very lonely, except for what you're hearing.
Yeah, I think that something, maybe to do ahead of time is on this piece of paper to write down the 5 senses and either list an example of what you can talk about in this corridor, some examples of that. The other thing is that if you have a difficulty with words or descriptive words, to put some descriptive words associated with that emotion and that sense. So, for example, if you want something to evoke sadness, you might use the words, like lonely or desolate, abandoned. Yeah, so just writing down very evocative words could also get your mind kind of going for how to make this emotion come out in your description.
Exactly. Very good. Yeah, that's pretty much all I really use for a template, and a lot of times I don't even write it down. It just become kind of nature for me to look at these couple areas. But that's a very good exercise, and it can be done with any emotion and pretty much any setting, any detail you really want to focus on. You can use kind of the same template. Hey, so is there anything you guys would like to add or say before we close it out? Okay. Hey, so I thank you both for coming and doing this video with me. I definitely learned a little bit each time myself. It was definitely fun, and I enjoy just sitting and chatting with other DMs. So if you guys would like to give a little outro for yourselves, you're welcome to.
Yeah, so thank you, Jaren, for having us on here, allowing us to talk, hang out with you, talk about some things. And I know it can be very hard for new DMs to kind of develop some of these skills. So making these videos and talking about this stuff just from an experience standpoint is totally invaluable. So thank you for doing this. And it is such a privilege to be on here and talk about it. So thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. Pleasure having you, Megan.
And what she said. All that. Thanks for having us on. It was a blast talking to the guys and discussing, the less like, tactical or, fantastical side of things. Just like, hey, how do characters feel? And so that's a good discussion to have. So, yeah.
Exactly. Hey, and let me guess, your better half stole the words out of your mouth again.
Absolutely, all the time.
Well, it was a pleasure having you both. I always love hanging out. So I hope our viewers will get something out of this, use it, it's just something we kind of picked up as we've been DMing and playing over who knows how long. For me, it's going on close to 35 years now. So until next time, may the dice always roll in your favor.